Welcome back to the Building Things with Machine Learning podcast. I'm Yosh Ho. In every episode, I interview people who are building really interesting products using ML. This week, I'm excited to have Rosa Lin, founder and CEO of Tolstoy. Rosa, welcome. Maybe we could get started just by telling us about what Tolstoy does. What problem does Tolstoy AI solve?
Yeah, no, thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to be here. So Tolstoy, so we are a machine learning startup. So we use machine learning to process very large amounts of text-based data that people would otherwise have to process manually. So typically when our clients come to us, they have, say, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands, sometimes millions of, various application forms, emails, text messages, legal documents, all sorts of things where you would otherwise need to hire a team of people to read through and sort in some way. So basically read through, maybe they're categorizing things, maybe they're looking for certain stuff and they need to extract it out. Maybe they need to put that into a database. Sometimes it's as simple as just, transcribing something. Maybe they have something embedded in an image and they just need to get that text out as accurately as possible. So we automate all of that process for them.
Help me understand, when you talk about text and documents, is this mostly already digitized? Because I noticed on your website you talked about 100-year-old documents. So is there also a kind of a OCR or intelligent document processing aspect to what you do?
Yeah. So people come to us throughout the whole life cycle of text-based data. So they have stuff from as raw as scanned images. And so, as you mentioned, sometimes people come to us, they have historical documents. Some of them are extremely old. Maybe they're over 100 years old. Maybe they were created at the turn of the century, etc. And they've just scanned it. It's a raw image. And they need someone to both extract the text and then maybe do something with it. So that's at one end of that's like the deep end. And then from there, you have it all the way to folks who have everything completely digitized. So maybe they're processing text messages, SMS messages, or emails. It's completely text data that they can feed into our API and then get some sort of result out the other end. So there's no OCR or that sort of extraction needed. They have just the raw text. So we cover both ends. We cover folks who need the OCR and sometimes very specialized OCR, all the way for folks who have completely digitized text.
And who are your typical customers that you're working with that kind of need help with analyzing their text?
Yeah. So we help folks all the way from startups. So folks who are very tech forward, very tech savvy. They have a lot of text-based data. Maybe they are they process people's messages, maybe they do customer service, etc. And then so they have a very easy way for them to use an API, all the way to more traditional folks. So actually the bulk of our customers, a lot of them are, say, energy companies, utilities, sometimes universities, legal companies who have, paper, they have paper documents. Like some of them, they have, rooms full of boxes of paper that they are in the process of digitizing, and they need to, digitize that stuff and put it into a database somewhere so that they can actually search it and make use of it, especially now that people are remote. They need access to all that data. So yeah, we cover a full gamut. Our customers are very different. Some of them are very tech savvy, and some of them, they're so used to working with literally paper and pencil. Yeah.
Wow. You mentioned that you have an API available. Are your use cases more about real-time processing, or is it more batch processing for analytics and sort of data science applications?
Yeah. So it really depends. Some customers, they have data that they need to process on a regular basis. They have text that's coming in every day, every month, etc. And for those folks, we set up an API, and then they can just feed it through. Other folks, especially the folks who are, say, digitizing their historical records, they have batches of documents. And so it's more of a, they have a giant different batches of documents that they just need to digitize one time. And then from there on, we can help them access and sort of tag that data for them to easily parse through. Yeah.
Well, can you give me an example and maybe set up a use case of somebody who's kind of actually using either your API or your service?
Yeah, definitely. So I have a couple use cases set up for you that I want to show you. So the very first one is a project we did a couple years ago. So it's actually with the Wall Street Journal. So they were in the process of digitizing their historical newspapers. So it was their 130th year anniversary. And they wanted to do a special anniversary edition where they put in like some of the most important and key articles from the past 130 years.
Mm-hmm.
Um, the only thing was that a lot of it was in these extremely old newspapers, like these broadsheets. And they tried to use off-the-shelf OCR software, optical character recognition, to try and get that text out. But it just didn't work very well. It just didn't work at all, honestly. And so that's when they came to us and they asked if we could help them out. And we looked at it and we said, yeah, sure, we can. We'll build you a custom OCR model to help you pull this text out. So let me just share with you some of what their articles look like so you get a sense. So for example, here's one about, when Walmart was getting started. This
Mm-hmm.
one's from 1981. This one's all right. It's the text is decent. It has a mix of pictures and text,
Mm-hmm.
and then has this column text.
Mm-hmm.
This one's okay. Let me show you some others. So this one's a really old one. This one's from 1898.
Mm-hmm.
And so as you see, the text is like very,
Very
very,
difficult to read.
yeah.
Yeah.
And this is after image processing. So
Mm.
this is after you've binarized the image and made it black and white. The actual scan was very, very yellow. It
Yeah.
was like faded and yellow, etc. Because these are literal papers that they've gone and scanned.
Could you, sorry to interrupt, but could you give
Uh,
me a feeling for why off-the-shelf OCR tools just did not solve the problem for the Wall Street Journal in this case?
yeah, definitely. So most off-the-shelf OCR tools out there, they read text literally. They read text left to right
Mm-hmm.
and up to down, right?
Mm-hmm.
They don't really distinguish between columns
Mm.
or titles or any of this other stuff.
Yeah.
And that's most of the problem it has. I mean, the second problem is sometimes if you have very old or tricky type of documents, you need to do a fair amount of image pre-processing in order to get the text, the image clear enough so that the OCR works well.
Mm-hmm.
That's another aspect of it. But honestly, in this particular case, a lot of it was just because it was in all these column text.
Columns,
There's,
yeah.
there's bylines, there's dates,
Right.
there's titles.
Captions, yeah.
Yeah, and then there's portraits and pictures, etc. And then, so the OCR just didn't do well with this.
Got it.
The other thing about these articles is they existed in these broadsheets where there's no rule particularly with how the columns would be arranged. And then so they could look like this. They could have, one really short one and some really, really long ones.
Mm-hmm.
And so we had to find a way to be able to capture these columns in a way that's human readable, just like a human can read it. And then so we had to find a rule that could account for these type of, this variation in columns.
Yeah.
So the way we did that is show you some pictures that our engineers had gotten. So this is just what I have been describing to you. The ground truth is these columns. So ground truth is in data science, it's just sort of a term like this is the truth. No one's interpretation of it. And so you kind of need ground truth in order to build a model off of. And then, for example, in say Google's off-the-shelf OCR, Google Cloud Vision, it reads everything side to side and up and down.
I can really see the
Yeah.
weakness now where, and it's great to actually call out a name brand platform that folks might be thinking, well, what do I need Tolstoy for when I've got Google's power? But you can see that Google is pretty obviously making some mistakes here in the bounding block.
Yeah. And then the other issue is the images, the mix of text and images. Oftentimes the off-the-shelf OCR software, it doesn't know what to do with images.
Right.
It's trying to figure out if there's text there. It doesn't recognize that it's a picture. So you have to build a model that can recognize whether it's text or a picture, and then only transcribe it if it's text. Let me show you some image transformations that our engineers had to do. So basically, you have to do a base level of image preprocessing. The very first thing you want to do is grayscale it. If you have color images, you want to make it as grayscale, a range of white to black. After that, you want to binarize it. So you want to make it just black or white, right? To make it as clear as possible. The next step, what we wanted to do was to create these blocks, so sort of like blobs. This way, we can figure out the reading order as efficiently as possible. So how we did that was we dilated the text. We dilated it until the text closest to each other started to merge. And from there, we figured out which texts were closest to each other. And from that, we could merge them into these sort of solid blocks.
Right. It's really amazing.
Yeah.
I mean, this goes way beyond traditional OCR. I mean, you're really applying computer vision techniques here to be able to understand these documents here.
Yeah. And you'll find that for a lot of folks with more historical documents or tricky, more complex documents, it's it's part computer vision, part NLP,
right,
part OCR.
Right.
Yeah. So after you have the blocks, now you can keep on merging them. Now you can actually apply an algorithm or a simple rule step. Okay.
Yeah.
So if read them, if blob 1 is above blob 2, and there's nothing to the left or overlapping between them, then you can figure out a reading order where it's, okay, this first, top down, and then go to the next one, top down, and then go to the next one, top down. And then so finally you have a human level reading order. And the last thing that you need to do is to basically figure out whether something is text or an image. Our engineers at the time used state-of-the-art VGG16 to classify it. There's many other more modern methods now, but it's just a way for you to determine whether something is text or an image block. So using that, we were able to pull out their text really well. It allowed them to make their 130th anniversary edition, and got all those cool articles and images out for them. And so they could print this and distribute it to all their readers.
This is amazing. Thank you so much for sharing such a visually engaging example of how your technology works. And it's such a cool, as you said, combination of OCR, CV, NLP with state-of-the-art techniques.
I wanted to share with you also a second example, in case it's interesting. And this is more representative of the bulk of the work we do now, and most folks' use cases. And this is where they have, they not only need the transcription, but they need to do something after that. They need to classify the text. So let me just jump over. All right. So this is work that we do with the utilities. So let's just see.
The utility companies like my power provider or
or your water utility, etc. So they have all these historical maintenance records that they're also digitizing. And so these, as well as the newspaper articles, these can be extremely old. They can be as old as the city or town itself. But their problem is, not only do they have to scan it, they have to extract certain data out of it, right? They have to extract various materials or dates or addresses or sizes of different infrastructure elements. And one of the key things that we've been helping, say, the water utilities do is just to find lead pipes.
Sure.
So, yeah. So it's really interesting in that lead pipes, there's nowhere else they have that data except for in their documents.
Hmm.
So it's only written in some of these maintenance records. So if you look at this document, can you spot the word lead in here?
No, I cannot. No, it doesn't. I was hoping there'd be a checkbox that says lead because
Oh
I guess at
no,
the time
no,
they didn't realize it
they
was,
just write it
unsafe.
everywhere. Yeah, no, the word lead is right here.
Oh my God, there it is. It's such a weird script there.
Yeah,
Somebody was clearly writing in the margin at the edge there. It's
yeah,
slanted wrong. Interesting.
yeah. So they just write it all over. They write it in the margins. They write it, all over this page. And when you're dealing with hundreds of thousands of pages, it's basically like finding a needle in a haystack
Yeah.
to find that word there because it's nowhere else, right? Um, so yeah, we help them, grab this type of information out into a database so that they can then replace the lead piping and get lead out of people's
Yeah,
water
amazing. And
systems.
so handwriting recognition, it's a really funny old script. It's sideways, so all kinds of challenges. Not quite as simple as just OCRing LEAD in Times New Roman font. I get the challenge.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. Nice. Okay.
Cool.
Uh-huh.
Well, thanks for sharing such awesome examples. And you said that this is a kind of an example of what you're doing for the most part these days. So is that right that a lot of the types of customers who maybe are watching this podcast should call you if they're like a utility or somebody
Yeah.
trying to go through old documents to kind of gather intelligence on their infrastructure and physical plant? Is that a good use
Mhm.
case?
Yeah, definitely. So anyone with like heavy infrastructure, so utilities, energy companies, oil and gas companies, that those sorts of people who have just a lot of maintenance records and they need to extract that data pretty accurately,
Mm-hmm.
and then do something with that data. So, oftentimes they're using this to diagnose issues. Maybe they had utility infrastructure fail and they're trying to figure out, what happened there. And they're trying to go through the historical records to see if there was something they could have used to predict that failure.
Mm-hmm.
That's a major use case.
Yeah.
Um, Other ones are just like, know what they have. So for
Yeah.
the water utilities, just knowing like where's their lead pipes.
Right, right.
You know,
Totally makes sense.
yeah.
ML is an unpredictable tool before you use it. It's stochastic. It's never 100% accurate. How did you know that ML would be able to solve, this class of problem, successfully at a high enough, level of accuracy to be, usable in business applications?
Yeah. So honestly, it's trial and error. You just have to test it out. You have to
Mm-hmm.
test it out in the real world. So you have to go and talk to users, and then you have to get them to give you some of their data,
Mm-hmm.
some samples, and then you test it together. So it's very much iterative. It's very much a collaborative work because we're not energy or utility experts, so
Right.
we're not legal experts, etc. So we need to work with the experts on their end to figure out, exactly what they're looking for, exactly what's pertinent and what's important information. Um, so that's a big part of it.
Mm-hmm.
The other thing is that AI and ML, it's not a magic worker. I mean, some folks tell us it is magic,
Mm-hmm.
but it's not perfect, right? It's even when it's better and it's capable of processing a lot of stuff that people aren't able to just manually, it's still not perfect.
Mm-hmm.
And you'll get the best results if you have some folks at the very end reviewing and checking the
Yeah,
data.
keeping a human in the loop.
Yeah. So you definitely need human in the loop. So
Mm-hmm.
in our work with utilities, we do reduce the manual work for them by orders of magnitude, but they still need a team at the very end to go in and review the work, especially for like numbers and other things that need to be accurate. So we do need to pair it with people. Yeah.
Gotcha. Good advice. Well, if I can switch gears a little bit and talk a little bit about, your personal journey. You were a bio major and a journalism major. You worked as a reporter at
Yeah.
well-known publications. What led you to transition, kind of two parts really? First is transition to being an entrepreneur, and secondly, transitioning to founding this specific product idea around Tolstoy?
Yeah. So I guess my journey would have to start back when I was a kid. So I love writing. I love the written word. I love books. I wrote a novel when I was a teenager.
Mm-hmm.
And so I love books and writing. So Tolstoy is my favorite author.
Mm-hmm.
I love War and Peace. That's my favorite novel. I think it's wonderful. I've always loved writing ever since I was very, very young. When I was 15, I got the opportunity to go to college early. So I did this math and science program in Texas where I grew up that allowed folks who are good at STEM to like go to college early, and they give you a full ride, give you a full scholarship. And so that's what I did. And one of the requirements was I study a science or math major, so I picked biology. I thought it was really, really interesting. So I was a biology major. I still think it's a fascinating field. But I worked very briefly in a lab and discovered that's not for me. I just can't spend my time, inside underground somewhere looking in a microscope.
Dude, I was a chem minor, and
Okay,
got into
yeah,
molecular cell biology
yeah.
briefly, and I personally love being in a lab and having the
Okay,
hood,
yeah.
blasting over me and just
Oh,
seeing different
wow.
chemicals. But
You
I
don't know what
understand
you're
it's
breathing in.
exactly, what are you breathing in exactly.
Yeah. No, I still think it's a really cool field. But I wanted to explore other things. So, I had graduated early, so I was about 19. I didn't know what I wanted to do in the world, basically, but I love writing, and I wanted to write for a living someday. And so I thought a good way to segue into that was to go to journalism school.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's what I did. Went to
Awesome.
journalism school up at Northwestern. It was a blast. It was very, very different from my undergrad.
Mm-hmm.
They push you out, go interview strangers on the street,
Mm-hmm.
and go interview all these folks and write these stories on deadline. But it was a lot of fun. And so, yeah, eventually I ended up as a journalist in DC, and just covering climate change, energy, the environment, etc. But I always felt a pull towards something creative, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like a little more creative, and I always liked all the new technology that was coming out.
Mm-hmm.
So when I ended up at the World Bank, I was working on their climate change team, and it was about 2015. And I was like, oh, there's all this AI stuff coming out. It's just really cool. I mean, it has nothing to do with my day job, but I just think it's like super cool and I want to get into it. So I started an AI hobbyist club. So there were just
Oh.
3 of us. We'll meet on the weekends.
Uh-huh.
We'll do pet projects. Like we built a pretty bad chatbot based on the entire works of Shakespeare and
Uh-huh.
O.J. Simpson trials. So we're like, you doth hide that gun beneath your door. Yeah, no, it was fun. And that eventually led to an actual project. So I was at the World Bank and I noticed that they had a team of 40 people just reading and categorizing these project documents. So these are like 50 to 100-page documents, and they'll spend many, many months just like going through and tagging tens of thousands of documents. And I was like, oh, well, this looks like, a multi-classification problem. Could be automated, so maybe let's just try it out. So I spent months tracking down the training data we would need from various corners of the World Bank. Finally, we gathered enough training data, and we built a pretty straightforward model to process it. And yeah, it actually worked really, really well. And that led to our first contract, which was over at the World Bank. And that led to me starting a company, which eventually was Tolstoy.
Do you think your journalism helped you, or was it just a proximity to World Bank, the institution, that gave you insight into AI as an interesting trend?
So it was 2015. So artificial intelligence, AI, was being thrown around a lot,
Yeah.
just like as buzzwords, in various conferences and all this stuff. And I I tried really hard to find someone at the World Bank who was actually working on it. So I talked to all of these people in all these different departments and stuff, and I didn't find someone truly working on it within the World Bank. And then so I realized that a lot of it was still very nascent. It was the time period where people were talking about it in these big institutions, but most of the work wasn't yet done in these big organizations. And so I thought that was the opportunity.
So you saw the opportunity, but how did you see that AI was really something, because there have been other kind of technologies that kind of come and go. And how did you know that this was like real and really could make an impact?
So one of it is just having friends who are like-minded. So, I was in DC. DC is a world of lawyers and economists, etc., nonprofits. But, one of the members of my AI hobbyist club, his name was Alex. He was my friend. He lived in my building. He worked at the Bureau of Labor Statistics. And he saw the statistics, and he was very ML-minded, ML-driven. And he actually implemented a model there that helped him process a lot of these work-related injury data and stuff. And so I saw that it could work for them at this other, institution, and this is the data that you need, etc. And I saw that that was really applicable within, say, the World Bank or other institutions around.
That is an amazing journey. I wasn't planning to ask you this, but I kind of thought when a couple of things. I mean, when I was at the Associated Press myself, the CEO joked that people didn't get into it because they like math, but you were actually a STEM major, so you had
I do like math.
You had that connection on both sides of it. And also I think of like Mike Moritz, the legendary Sequoia capital investor who started off as a journalist, and many others. As you mentioned, being forced to interview people on the street, I imagine that some of those kind of skills that you learned being a little bit fearless and bold as a journalist translate to being an entrepreneur. Could you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, definitely. So one of the big things I learned from being a journalist was just how to interview people and how to talk to people and ask them questions. Before I went to journalism school, I wasn't anything like I wasn't a chatty, like talk to strangers on the street type at all. That forced me out of my element. But it trains you to like think up of questions and think of them on the dot, which was like super, super helpful when we got started out. Just learning about people's use cases and about their pain points, and then also selling to them, because a lot of sales is just talking to people and asking what they need, and then eventually that sells them, and then, so that was super, super helpful. The other thing that journalism taught me was that basically anything is possible, as in like, if you find one end of a thread, if you pull on it enough, you'll finally find the rest, the ball of thread. You can unspool that story, right? So no matter where you start, there's a way. There's a way to your source, if you're tracking down sources as a journalist, or there's a way to your customer if you have a specific prize customer in mind, and you can work your way through all the people and contacts you need to get there. So those are some really important things that journalism taught me that I would have never envisioned otherwise. Wow. I thought it was super helpful. Yeah.
Amazing. Well, another experience that you had is actually going through the Y-Combinator program. Can you tell us a little bit about maybe just the application process and how you got in?
Yeah, definitely. So I think it was summer 2018. So it was a while ago. So I had then co-founder, we were at the World Bank, she was up at MIT, and we were just, we had this idea of starting this company, and, we were talking to all these people, we were getting this World Bank contract. And, at some point, the topic of YC came up, and I was like, oh, I think we should go for it. And she's like, oh, no, I'm still in school. Like, can we hold off? And I think, and I was like, no, I think we're ready. Like, they tell you to apply before you're ready, right? And I know we just got started, but I think we can do it. So, and we're like, okay, we don't get in, like, who cares? Like, we'll keep on going, right? We don't mind. Yeah. And then so, It was like about September. We applied, I think, like a few days before the deadline.
Mm-hmm.
But at that point, we had a World Bank contract, and we were going around talking to as many people as we could. So we would go in person to like the State Department, the DOJ, NASA, New York Times, Washington Post, etc. Just anyone we could, up and down the East Coast, etc. Just to learn more about people's problems, especially like big paper pushers, like within the government or other big organizations, and just learning all about that. So yeah, sometime around, I think, October or November, we got an invite to the YC interview, which if anyone has applied before, it's a nerve-wracking 10-minute experience.
10 minutes. That's all you
10
get.
minutes. Yeah. And it was in person back then. So we had to fly over to San Francisco, Mountain View. Back then.
And you go in for a 10-minute meeting. That's it.
Yeah, 10 minutes. Forgot if they funded us back then just to go. I forgot. But we did have some funding from MIT already, so it helped cover some of our travel costs. But yeah, no, we went there. It was like, we prepared. We had like at least 6 mock interviews with anyone we could find. Like I got my World Bank manager to give us a mock interview.
Yeah.
We found, previous YC alum, just to like practice. And you have to be snappy. You have to be very succinct and just answer the question and nothing more. Because they're just going to hit you with questions. Yeah, and then so we got there. I remember how I felt sitting on the couch before walking into office, before walking into the interview. And I was just like, all right, in the zone. When we walk in, there's 3 of them. I think it was Jared Freeman, Adora Chung, and Trevor Blackwell. And they were super nice. They hit us with all the questions. We prepared, so we had our answers ready. And that was it. That was the 10 minutes. And then afterwards, we went, grabbed bubble tea, met up with some people in town. And in my gut, I knew that we got in for some reason. Like my co-founder had doubts. But for some reason, I thought we got in. So when they gave us a call that evening, I was like, this is it. Yeah. And then so we were super elated. We got that call. We were like, all right, it's go time. Yeah. So she dropped out of MIT. I quit my job at the World Bank.
Wow.
And then we moved to SF. And that all took in a span about a couple of months.
Wow.
Yeah.
Amazing. What a great story.
Yeah.
And is that still sort of the process today, that you apply online and then there's a 10-minute interview with some of the team?
Yeah. The change nowadays, I believe, is since people went remote during the pandemic, a lot of that is remote now. And so it's not as in person. I think they're allowing people, there's more in-person sessions now, but they're allowing some teams to just remain abroad, and so they could spend their entire YC 3 months, in their home country or somewhere else. But I think it's just so much fun and so much richer to be, to go someplace and be with all these other entrepreneurs. Because honestly, the biggest things I learned from going through the accelerator were from our fellow founders, right? You go to these talks, which are amazing, and all this stuff. But you, as a founder, especially starting out, where you don't know anything at all, you need someone in the trenches with you in the nitty gritty. And those are your other founders, the other founders in your batch, or just other founders in your tech ecosystem. And they just help you so much, either if you're commiserating about something, or you're trading notes about sales or about tech. I don't know how many times we ran into like a technical issue, and there was someone living in our house who was like an ML engineer or like some other backend engineer or whatever. Just get them over, fix the problem, that sort of thing. Like you need the density, right?
Yeah.
You need propinquity in order to have people together and create that magic that grows young startups. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, I want to thank Rosa for an awesome conversation about AI, as well as your background. And to learn more, you can visit the link in the show notes, or just visit tolstoy.ai. And thanks everyone for checking out this episode. If you enjoy this podcast, please give us a rating on Apple iTunes or Google Podcasts or your favorite podcast store. It helps others find our podcast.